Let's talk about realistic expectations when it comes to hunting game in shit hit the fan. I think that there's some pretty unrealistic expectations out there. I get a ton of comments about it. And as you guys know, my goal is to help as many people make it through SHTF as possible. And so it's necessary to do this video. We need to look at the numbers. We need to think about the history of it and be realistic with ourselves and our own abilities and decide, can you depend on hunting wild game in shit hit the fan as a source of sustenance? What we have on this scale is over here, we got the guys that are like, I'm going to run to the woods, man, and live off venison for the rest of my life and trout, And most of these dudes are wrong. They just don't live in the right part of the U.S. to have this easy plan where they get out there in their travel trailer at their favorite hunt spot, and everything just goes smoothly for the rest of their days, On the flip side, if you're someone that lives in an inhospitable place, especially in the northern climates where there's a lot of big animals, and let's say there's nobody near you for miles and miles and miles, you know what? You might be right. If you can hunt and you can do it and you're super remote like that, you might be right, okay? But for most of us, especially like lower 48ers, I don't think it's very realistic that that's how you're going to rock it. On the flip side, and this is what we're going to spend most of our time talking about, you have people that like, all the game is going to be dead in a day, or 6 days or a month. It's all going to be wiped out. History proves this. And I have gotten like hundreds,
if not thousands of comments saying this on my TikTok.
If history proves all the game was wiped out in 2 weeks, sources, cite it. Come on, man, cite it. Where in history did all the game get wiped out in 2 weeks or a month or even a year? It never happened, man, because there's still game. That's how this works, okay? Even if there's a lot of game pressure and animals have been hunted, pretty badly to a point where they might be near extinction, well, they keep having babies. And so if they're still alive today, they were never wiped out. So that argument right there is just, okay? And I know people, let's talk about some examples where we've come close to making certain animals extinct. We're going to use the Great Depression as one of those examples, okay? 1929 to 1939. Let's talk about the population of the Great Depression. 129 million Americans. Roughly 80% of them lived in the country and 20% of them lived in the city. Versus today, if we throw illegals in there, we'll say 350 million souls in America. But the numbers are basically reverse about where they live. Roughly 80% live in the cities and 20% live in the country. Well, back in the Great Depression, during these hard times, a lot of these families that lived in the country really depended on game animals to supplement the rest of their diet. A lot of them had gardens and bought certain staples on their once a month trip to the town, and they did a lot of hunting. My Uncle Dwayne, rests in peace, he told me a few stories about his dad back in the day. His dad was part of the Greatest Generation and, had been in World War II and had a Springfield bolt-action 30-06 rifle, the same model. I don't know if it was the same rifle, but the same model he had in World War II when he was deployed to Europe. And my uncle told me that he had watched that he basically was raised on venison. That's what they had for meat. If they wanted meat, they had to go kill something. That's literally how it was. And they didn't have any livestock. They were very poor. And he told me he had seen his dad shoot running deer at 300 yards with iron sights on this rifle. He'd seen him shoot them leaping over fences like airborne. And the guy was just a badass marksman. And man, I can only imagine what kind of hurting he put on the Germans in World War II. You know, apparently he didn't like to talk about the war, and probably for good reason. At any rate, he was a hell of a freaking hunter. Well, if you go back to the Great Depression, and although this was pre-World War II, it was also post-World War I. You had a lot of vets that came back from World War I that were still alive during that period of time. And so, you know, when people tell me that, oh, when the shit hits the fan, all the game's going to be wiped out in 2 weeks, it just doesn't make any mathematical sense. At the end of 10 years of Great Depression, you had squirrels and deer that were nearly extinct in parts of the country. A lot of people have made comments, oh, like my great aunt told me she never saw a deer growing up. Okay, well, yeah, it makes sense. Did she go wander through the woods looking for them? Did she keep her eyes peeled for tracks? Or is she just, you know, hanging out on the front porch playing with Lincoln logs and shit, expecting a deer to come prance across the lawn? Because, of course, that wouldn't happen back then. Think about the game pressure. You know, the game pressure would have been extreme. And we are going to see a measure of that when shit hits the fan, definitely. But if we look at the numbers and where people lived and how people fed their families in the Great Depression and compare it to today, you'll see that the picture is not what these people over here are painting, that all the game's going to be hunted out in a short period of time. Okay. So let's talk about the numbers today. Well, depending on who you ask, there's 329 to 334 million Americans. And then throw illegals in. We know that 10 million came over the border in the last 3 years. So we're just going to say 350 million souls in America today, roughly. Well, only 30% of Americans own firearms. So if we take 30% of 350 million, that leaves us with what? 105 million firearm owners, okay? Now, I'm willing to bet that probably half of those people do not own firearms suitable for hunting. Well, so 105 million, that brings us down to 52.5 million Americans with firearms suitable for hunting. I am willing to bet you that in the Great Depression, there were more than 52.5 million Americans that had firearms suitable for hunting. In America these days, only 4.1% of Americans get a hunting license every year. Well, is that everybody hunting? No, it's not, right? You got some poachers out there. So let's round it up to 5%. 5% of Americans are actively out there hunting animals every year. How many of them are successful? How many guys do you know that are very serious deer hunters and have all their expensive ass shit, and they get out there for a few weekends every deer season and they can't kill a damn thing? So 5% of modern Americans, that's what? That's going to put us at 17.5 million Americans that actively hunt a year. Again, guarantee you that number was much, much higher in the Great Depression. And marksmanship skills today are lacking, pimps. They're lacking. People used to hunt every damn thing with a 30-30 Winchester. It was good enough to take moose, no problem. Elk, everything. Just had to get close enough. It's still good enough to do those things today, guys. But Americans always seem to feel like bigger is better. A bigger car is better. A bigger house is better. A bigger caliber, a bigger cartridge is better. I don't think it's necessarily so much better. It does take away a bit of the margin of error, but look at where our marksmanship skills are today. And I'm not talking for you super good shooters. I got a number of my patrons on my Patreon, glad to have them on there, that have posted some pictures of their shot groups at 100 yards, and they can shoot. That's freaking awesome. But dudes, that's not the normal American anymore. That used to be the normal American back in the Great Depression, and that is gone. That is over with. A lot of people like to talk about other instances of animals going extinct or being brought close to extinction because of humans. You know, some people talk about the buffalo in North America. There was roughly 25 to 30 million bison. They're not buffalo, they're bison. Back in the 1600s. And yes, they were almost hunted to extinction. But did it happen in 2 weeks? No, it did not happen in freaking 2 weeks or a month. It took a number of years of people who were just shooting these animals for pelts, heads, freaking weird shit. You know, they were not butchering these animals and eating them. Had they been doing that, it would have taken them a lot longer to take that animal to the edge of extinction. People talk about aurochs in Europe, which is basically what cows are descended from. Aurochs themselves are no longer with us. They are extinct. But look what they gave us before they left the planet. Okay, and a lot of animals that end up extinct, guys, they end up extinct because they're stupid. Let's look at pandas. You know, did pandas get just hunted to freaking extinction? Or are they going extinct because they have low T? I'm telling you what, man, if I was a male panda and was living in solitary confinement in some zoo for 8 years and you stuck a female panda in there with me, I would pound her to death in a week. You know, so that animal's going extinct because it's got freaking low T and its day is done. A lot of people say that because there's no bison anymore, that natural resource being gone, there's a lot less like meat out there on four hoofs, you know, in North America that people could survive off the SHTF. Well, at the same time, there's over 92 million head of cattle. So there's almost 4 times, there's 3 to almost 4 times as much big animals on 4 hoofs in America today as there was in the 1600s. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of ranchers are going to be willing to trade beef for security and other things that they can trade for. And let me throw this out there real quick. If you're a rancher and you're dependent on the grid to water your animals, it might be time to drill a solar well or throw a solar pump down in an existing well on your property. Think about it. People like to talk a lot about the Native American numbers. You know, that, they were able to live in harmony with the wildlife out here because they weren't too numerous. And look at us today. Depending on who you ask, the numbers are that there was anywhere from 6 million to 60 million Native Americans in the U.S. when Columbus arrived. Usually the truth is going to be somewhere in the middle. So we're going to say it's 33 million Native Americans. Okay, so 33 million Native Americans. As I've already laid out for you, there's far less Americans today that hunt. It's roughly half. If 5% of Americans today hunt, it's half of the population of Native Americans that existed when Columbus showed up. Was there more game back then? Absolutely, there was more game back then. But how many Americans are actually going to make it through shit hit the fan long enough to hunt anything? Let's talk about the Golden Horde real quick. I'm the black sheep of the family, pimps. The huge majority of my family lives in a highly populated part of California. They are literally the Golden Horde. And we're going to use my brother and his friends as an example because that's going to be fun for me. My brother's got hunting rifles, hunting shotguns, and he's gone hunting with his buddies that are also a part of the Golden Horde and live in this highly populous part of California, the Bay Area. And he's never killed shit. He cannot successfully hunt. I don't even know that he's ever taken a shot on a live animal before. So when people say the Golden Horde is going to run to the hills and wipe out all the game in days, that's just BS. It's not true, guys. The massive majority of them can't hunt for shit. They are going to run to the hills, a lot of them, depending on what kind of SHTF scenario we're talking about. Let's say it's EMP. Let's use that as our example. The power grid goes down, the supply chain completely falls apart, people can't pump gas anymore. These people are going to basically eat up all the resources in their local area while victimizing each other before they run to the hills. And when they get to the hills, you know what? They are going to add a lot of game pressure. They're going to take shots on big animals from extreme distances and be largely ineffective. I don't think they're going to affect the small game population all that much. And the massive majority of these people are going to starve to death. They are not going to make it. How much impact are they actually going to have on wild game numbers? I think they're going to have a bit of an impact, but even more so, I think they are going to drastically increase the hunting pressure, and they're going to make it fairly unsafe to be out there walking around hunting, because now you have all of these desperate people trying to feed their wife and their kids. But game is not simply going to be wiped out in weeks. It's not going to happen. As a matter of fact, a lot of these people in the Golden Horde are going to end up working off indentured servitude for people that can feed them. That's probably what it's going to come down to, pimps. Let's talk about rabbits for a second. Guys, I have all kinds of comments from people saying that rabbits are going to be gone in weeks. That is the most ridiculous thing I think I have ever heard. I breed meat rabbits for my family, for both the hides and for the meat. And the gestation period for rabbits is 28 days. They drop a litter of kits, and they can literally get pregnant the same day they drop a litter of kits. So one doe rabbit can have over 100 kits in a single year. Rabbits are never going to go away, guys. Matter of fact, I tried to Google the hare and rabbit populations before I did this video, and nobody knows. I don't think that anyone's cared enough to actually try to run the numbers if they even could. I've seen places where there are literally hundreds of rabbits within a handful of acres. It's insane. I know dudes that go out and will literally shoot hundreds of rabbits in a single day, and they don't just go by themselves. These dudes will go through 4 digits worth of rabbits in a single day, and it does not affect the population at all. It does not put a dent in it. A lot of you guys that follow my channel, you know this is one of the big reasons I'm a big proponent of snares. Snaring is huge, guys. Rabbits are always going to be there. You can't strictly live off of it. You need other sources of sustenance. And that goes for any kind of lean game animal out there. It's just not going to be enough to get you through. Rabbits just happen to be, on the extreme lean side of game animals. Honestly, pimps, you don't want to strictly depend on hunting to feed your family and shit at the fan. You do not want to do that. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, period. You really need to be able to learn how to forage to a degree, grow your own crops, hunt, fish, and have some livestock if you could do it. That's what you really want to do. And do you need to do all 5? You don't need to do all 5, but pick 3. Pick 3 of them and go with those. Let's go through the full nuke war scenario. Lots of guys are like, oh, if we have full nuke war, all the game's going to die. No, it's not. Nope. There are a number of places in the US and Canada that will not suffer fallout from nuclear weapons. I'm also willing to bet that the population numbers of humans are going to rapidly disappear compared to game. Because think about it, a lot of high population centers are actually nuke targets. They're actually going to have freaking multiple freaking warheads flying out of those freaking Satan missiles that, Russia's got or whatever. And just immediately vaporizing massive numbers of the human population, whereas the animal populations are going to be affected by fallout. And yes, fallout is usually responsible for the largest number of deaths in a big nuclear exchange. So yes, you can expect the wildlife numbers to be affected quite a bit. But the wildlife in the non-affected areas are going to continue to breed and continue to spread, and eventually will repopulate the areas that were contaminated for a short period of time because of the short half-life of radioactive isotopes in nuclear warheads. So if you happen to live in a place in the US that's not likely to suffer any fallout or get nuked, you're in pretty damn good shape. I think it's time to wrap it, pimps. What did we learn in mountain school today? Well, for one, we learned that the animals are not going to disappear overnight, or in 2 weeks, or in a month, or in a year. It's not going to happen. People are going to disappear a lot faster than the animals are because most people just don't have the skills to get this job done anymore. They don't know how to hunt. They don't know how to snare. They don't know how to trap. They don't know how to fish. They don't know how to do any of this shit. The other thing we learned is that you need to diversify where you're getting your sustenance. You don't ever want to put all your freaking eggs in one basket. You need to be able to have multiple options as to how you're going to provide for your family. So definitely look at that as well. I'll be getting into more of those details and those things later on this channel. I'm going to wrap it right there though, guys. Okay. Like the video, share it with someone that needs to hear this. One of those dudes that's like, oh, the game's going to be gone in 2 weeks. And that's why they don't want to hunt. Oh, it's a waste of my time. I don't want to invest my time in it because it's pointless. Bullshit, man. It's not pointless. So share it with those guys. And then subscribe to the channel, follow along, check out my Patreon link in the description. Come support the channel. I can do bigger, better things with some extra support on there. And I'll see you guys in the next video.